Welcome to Reality Dread, the home of true horror stories.
I need you to understand something before I start. What happened to me in the Smoky Mountains wasn't supernatural. There were no monsters, no ghosts. Just two men, a military-grade radio, and a plan they'd been working on for 3 days before I accidentally heard every word of it. I'm a rational person, an engineer. I've camped alone my entire adult life, and the most frightening thing I've ever experienced wasn't something I saw in the dark. It was something I heard. Two voices, calm, organized, professional, describing exactly what they were going to do to my campsite at 3 a.m. They had no idea I was listening.
My name is Marcus Webb, 34 years old, electrical engineer from Nashville, Tennessee. I've been camping solo every October for 11 years straight. No phone signal, no people, no noise. Just me in the mountains for 1 week. It's the thing I look forward to most every year. I have one habit most solo campers don't share. I bring a portable shortwave radio. Not for emergencies. I have a satellite communicator for that. I bring it because I'm an engineer and I find radio signals genuinely interesting. In remote mountain areas, you pick up all kinds of signals. Aviation frequencies from planes passing overhead, weather data stations, sometimes radio operators from other countries bouncing signals off the ionosphere. It's all real radio stuff. I find it relaxing. I've been doing it for years without incident. This particular October, I drove 4 hours into the Great Smoky Mountains and hiked 6 miles off any marked trail to a clearing I'd used twice before. Perfect spot. Dry creek bed to the south, birch trees on the north side, good flat ground. I set up my tent, made coffee, built a fire. By 9 in the evening, everything was quiet, and I was happy. At 9:15, I turned on the radio. I swept through the frequencies the way I always do. Mostly static, some weather data, an aviation beacon. Normal. Then on 151.820 megahertz, a GMRS frequency, the kind used by hikers and hunters with handheld radios, I picked up 2 voices. I almost moved on. People talk on GMRS frequencies all the time. But then I heard my campsite described in detail, and I stopped moving the dial. The first voice was calm, older. He was describing the campsite layout. Blue tent, single occupant, 6 miles from the nearest trailhead. Arrived approximately 1400 hours. No vehicle visible from the ridge. No dog. Cooking gear stored outside the tent. 1 light source. Campfire. Currently active. The second voice asked, "Does he have anything worth taking?" The first voice said, "Backpack looks high-end, probably 3,000 to 4,000 in gear. Satellite communicator on the tent pole. Those go for 800 used. He's got a camp kitchen set. Sleeping system looks expensive. Yeah, it's worth the walk." I sat completely still. I understood immediately what I was hearing. These weren't park rangers. These weren't passing hikers. These were 2 men on a ridge above my campsite who had been watching me with binoculars. And they were planning to rob me in the middle of the night. The second voice said, "When?"
The first voice said, "We wait until the fire goes down. He'll be asleep by midnight. We go in at 3. Then the second voice said something that changed the nature of what I was dealing with entirely. He said, "And if he wakes up?" There was a pause. The first voice said, "He won't be a problem." I put the radio down very carefully and looked into the dark forest surrounding my camp. My first instinct was to run, pack everything and go. But 6 miles of mountain trail at night with a headlamp is not a fast escape. If they were watching the camp, they would see me moving, and I had no idea where they were positioned. Between me and the trailhead, or behind me, My second instinct was to call for help, but my satellite communicator was clipped to the tent pole, outside the tent, in clear view of wherever they were watching from. Reaching for it would tell them I knew. So I made a decision. I kept the radio on, and I listened. For the next 2 hours, I heard everything. They discussed the approach route, coming in from the northeast along the creek bed. They discussed timing, 3 a.m. when they estimated I'd be in my deepest sleep. They discussed how to move through the camp quietly. The first voice was clearly the experienced one. He'd done this before. The second voice asked questions that made me understand he hadn't.
At one point, the first voice said, "You always watch them for 2 or 3 days first. Learn the routine. Know exactly what you're walking into. This one's been here before. See how he's set up? Same spot, same layout. Predictable. Predictable is good for us." He had been watching me for at least 2 days before I even arrived at the campsite. At 11 p.m., I made my move. I did not run. I did not reach for my satellite communicator. I used the radio. GMRS frequencies are shared. Anyone with the radio on the same frequency can transmit. They could hear me just as clearly as I could hear them. I pressed the transmit button. I said, calmly and clearly, "I know you're on the ridge to the northeast. I've been listening for 2 hours. I have your entire conversation recorded on my phone. I've already sent the audio file and my GPS coordinates to 3 people who have instructions to contact the Cherokee County Sheriff if they don't hear from me by 6 a.m. I know you're coming at 3. I'll be awake. I'd strongly suggest you find somewhere else to be tonight." Then I released the button. Silence on the frequency for about 15 seconds. Then the second voice said quietly, "How long has he been listening?" The first voice didn't answer. I heard movement, shuffling, then footsteps on rocky ground, moving fast, getting fainter. Then nothing. The frequency went completely silent. I did not sleep that night. I sat with my back against a tree at the edge of the clearing, facing northeast, with my knife in my hand and the radio in my lap, until the sky started to go gray at 5:30 a.m. No one came. At first light, I packed in 11 minutes and walked out. 3 days after I got home, I filed a full report with the Great Smoky Mountains National Park Service and the Cherokee County Sheriff's Office. I gave them the audio recording, the GPS coordinates, the frequency, the timestamps. The investigating ranger called me back 2 weeks later. He said they'd identified the area from my coordinates and found a campsite on the ridge to the northeast. Permanent setup. A lean-to structure, fire pit with months of ash, supply cache. Someone had been living there for a long time, long enough to have developed a detailed routine for watching campsites in the valley below. They found a notebook. The ranger didn't tell me everything that was in it, but he told me one thing. My name was in it. Not my real name, they didn't have that, but a description. Male, mid-30s, engineer type, solo camper, returns to the same site every October. Blue tent, 1 spoon of coffee, no sugar. They've been watching me for 3 years. The campsite was abandoned by the time they found it. Whoever it was, they were gone. The ranger said, "You did the right thing. Most people in that situation freeze. You didn't." I thanked him and hung up. I still camp. I went back this October. Different location, somewhere I've never been before. Somewhere no one has ever watched me set up. But I keep a fire going all night now, even in warm weather, even when I don't want to. Because something about the light makes me feel safer. And I keep the radio on the same frequency. I don't know what I'm listening for anymore, but I'm listening. I worked as a park ranger in an Appalachian National Park for almost 7 years. During that time,
I had dealt with lost hikers, injured campers, and people who ignored closed trails. But one case still keeps me awake at night. It started with a distress call from a trail that had been closed for nearly 7 years.
It happened in late October, just after most of the tourist season had ended. The leaves had already fallen, the nights were getting colder, and nearly all of the campsites had been closed for the winter. I was working the night shift with my partner, Daniel. Our station stood near the edge of the park, about 2 miles from an old fire tower that had not been used in years. The trail leading to it had been closed after a landslide destroyed part of the slope and washed away a small bridge. We were checking our equipment when the radio suddenly crackled. At first, I assumed it was ordinary interference. Then I heard a voice. "Is anyone there?" The voice was male, quiet and badly distorted. I picked up the radio. "Go ahead, this is the ranger station." There was a short pause. "I need help." "What's your location?" "The old fire tower, North Slope Trail." I looked at Daniel. He had heard it too. I asked him how he had gotten onto a closed trail. "I was in my tent," he said. "Someone is walking around it." "How many people are with you?" "I'm alone." "Are you injured?" "No. But he knows I'm here." His breathing became heavier. "Please hurry." I asked for his name, but there was no answer. The radio crackled once, and the signal disappeared. Daniel looked at me. "You understand that's impossible, right?" I did. The radio signal from that side of the mountain rarely reached the station, and tourists weren't supposed to have access to our frequency.
We packed backpacks, a first aid kit, spare batteries, and 2 flashlights. The temperature was around 40 degrees Fahrenheit, and it was expected to drop below freezing before sunrise. We drove as far as the old service road, then continued on foot. For the first 40 minutes, everything was quiet. The forest was completely still. There was no wind and no sound from animals, only our footsteps pressing into the wet leaves. Then Daniel stopped. "Did you hear that?" I turned off my flashlight. From somewhere to our right came a sound. One step, a pause, then another step. We aimed our flashlights toward the sound, but there was nothing there except trees and wet branches. "Probably a deer," Daniel whispered. But it didn't sound like a deer. The footsteps were too heavy and too steady. And the strangest part was that they moved parallel to us. They never came closer, but they never fell behind either. Someone was walking through the forest, keeping pace with us. We continued toward the fire tower. 20 minutes later, its outline appeared above the trees. A small green tent stood near the base of the tower. We announced that we were park rangers, but nobody answered. I unzipped the tent. It was empty. A sleeping bag lay on the ground. Beside it were a backpack, a flashlight, and a bottle of water. Everything looked as if someone had stepped outside for only a few minutes, but the tent had been unzipped from the inside. I examined the ground around it. There were footprints in the wet soil. They formed a wide circle around the tent, then another circle, and another. Whoever had made them had walked around the tent repeatedly, but there were no tracks leading toward the tent, and none leading away from it. Daniel crouched beside the footprints. "There's only one set," he said. "The campers?" Daniel shook his head. "They're too large." At that moment, my radio crackled again. We both froze. "Ranger station, go ahead," I said. The answer came almost immediately. "He's standing behind you." I turned around slowly. Daniel aimed his flashlight into the forest. The beam passed over tree trunks, branches, and thick bushes. There was no one there, No movement. No eyes reflecting in the darkness. Nothing.
Near the tent, I noticed something lying in the leaves. It was an old portable radio. It was switched off. I picked it up and examined the casing. It was a model the park had stopped using more than 10 years earlier. A faded station sticker was still attached to the back. I turned it on. The display showed a single channel. Then the voice came through again. "Don't turn on the light at the station." Daniel looked toward the trees. Between the branches, about 50 yards away, a weak light appeared. It looked like someone was covering a flashlight with their hand. Then it disappeared. We decided not to stay there. We took the backpack and the old radio and started back. The footsteps returned on our right. This time, they were closer. Neither of us spoke. We simply walked faster and kept our eyes on the trail. When we reached the station, it was almost 3 in the morning. The lights inside the building were on. I knew I had turned every light off before we left. Daniel drew his weapon, and I slowly opened the door. There was no one inside. No broken windows, no signs of forced entry. Everything was exactly where we had left it. Except for one thing. Our spare radio was sitting on the desk, the same radio we had left inside a locked cabinet. It was switched on. Static came from the speaker. Then the voice said, "You left the light on at the station." Daniel pulled the battery from the radio. At that exact moment, every light in the station went out. We stood in complete darkness. Then someone slowly walked across the wooden porch outside. One step. A pause. Another step. We didn't move. We didn't speak. After several minutes, the footsteps stopped. We checked every door and window, but no one was there. The next morning, I contacted the park headquarters and reported the tent. They searched the records for the old fire tower. That was when I learned what had happened there 7 years earlier. A hiker named Mark Ellison had gone toward the tower alone. He never came back. During the search, rangers received several radio transmissions from a man claiming to be near his tent. The final transmission came at 2:40 in the morning. "He's standing behind you." After that, the signal disappeared. Mark's body was never found. I asked my supervisor why the trail had not been completely removed from the park maps. He was silent for a long time. Then he said, "We closed it, but some people still go there." I didn't ask what he meant. I stopped working in that part of the park soon afterward. But sometimes, when I hear static in a radio, I still wonder if someone is trying to reach me. And every time I leave a room at night, I check whether the door is locked. Because one night, just before I left the station, that same voice came through the radio again. This time it didn't say, "He's standing behind you." It said, "Don't turn around. I'm already inside."